Britain seizes an Iranian oil tanker. Britain does this, Gibraltar, what is it called, Strait of Gibraltar, which is technically, it's Spanish waters, but Britain claims it is their territory. It's unclear entirely whether or not they were in Spanish waters or if they were in British territory. Spain didn't look too kindly on that particular point as trespassing on national sovereignty. But nevertheless, Britain seizes an Iranian tanker. Britain holds the crew, talking about they're going to prosecute or potentially prosecute the boat captains who were on those tankers. Iran was apoplectic, and they said they were going to respond to this. Well, they've responded. Iran has just seized 2 British oil tankers. Well, I'm sorry. One is British, one is Liberian. However, the Liberian one is operated by British outfit. Welcome to the Soapbox After Dark. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Soapbox After Dark. If you guys enjoy this content, you find yourself coming back here often, please like this video, share this video. We're trying to push the subscriber as high as we can possibly push it, get this show out there. So let's do the news. This is worrying news. Sleepwalkers. Essentially, we're sleepwalking ourselves into a larger conflict. When we look back on history, oftentimes it looks like it was inevitable. However, it wasn't inevitable. People made choices. Sometimes those choices were being done for rank political reasons, thinking with a certain degree of brinksmanship that X or Y is not going to take place in the larger world. It's brinksmanship. And it has massive, horrendous consequences. At the very least, the world that we're living in now is a result of the First World War. Any historian will tell you that. But let's get to the story. So 2 ships. One called, I want to get the name right, Stena Impero. Stena Impero. And the other one is the Mesdar. The Stena Impero is the British ship. The other one is the Liberian ship. But again, it was a British operated ship. They were stopped in the Strait of Hormuz by essentially speedboats, but in this kind, a helicopter. This is not exactly the viewing of this. This was a stopping of a previous tanker that was called a smuggling operation. But the tankers that were seized today were not smuggling operations. Here's the catch. The crew is safe and sound. Nobody was injured. Nobody was hurt. Armed men stormed the ships. That is true. A helicopter was involved in one of those processes. That is also true. And the ship are pissed off. Iran essentially, in one case, said that the boat had a fishing accident, hit a fishing boat. That was not independently verified. That was something that just came out in a news agency. But I want to talk about this for a moment because this is extremely interesting. So early on Saturday morning, the semi-official Iranian news agency Fars said the ship had taken to Bandar Abbas port and the crew remained on the vessel. There were 23 people on the crew. According to the news agency, the ship was involved in an accident with an Iranian fishing boat before it was seized. This was not confirmed. So let's keep going. It was stopped by speedboats with a helicopter. Now, they say they were in international waters. The second tanker, the Mesdar, which was a Liberian-flagged British-operated, also made a sudden diversion from its course towards the Saudi ports of Ras Tanura on Friday when the tracking data showed it moving northwards towards the Iranian coast before apparently turning off its signal, the transponder. So if you remember on the last show, I kind of made this point like it's kind of weird that the ship turned off its transponder. Even if the ship was having technical difficulties, what would that have to do with the transponder? And the entire point of the transponder is to let you know where the ship is in case of technical difficulties. So it was odd that it was off. Well, in this case, it seems like that might just be a thing. Apparently it was turned off and then it was turned back on with Iran saying they had seized the ship. Now, both people are saying there was nothing wrong with these ships. Iran is basing this in this kind of, no, look, we're legally allowed to stop these ships if we think that there's like environmental concerns or something like that. There's an episode of Star Trek where Picard was looking for a reason to stop a ship. And Picard couldn't find any real reason to stop a ship, so he impounded ship for health reasons, citing the code of international law that allows them to stop a ship to ensure that the crew is safe and healthy within the context of the ship. Iran is doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing. But understand why they're doing this. They're doing this because it's in response. It's in retaliation. They're not going so far as to seize a ship, take it, and keep it, but they are trying to make life miserable for the people that are involved in this process. You've taken our ship. You've done something that you had no business doing. You have no right to seize our ship. There's no law per se. I mean, you're doing this purely at the behest of the United States, but you have no grounds to do this. And so their point is retaliation. And why shouldn't they retaliate? Why don't they have a right to retaliate? Whether it makes good sense or not. And by the way, tit for tat is necessary in these conflicts. But whatever you believe, why don't they have a right to respond to what is an outright provocation by the US and the UK? They took their ship. They impounded their crew. This is the second ship that was taken by people associated with West. I mean, Saudi also has one of their ships. They're responding. Why wouldn't they respond? It's an odd response to not think that they wouldn't respond to such provocation. And if you didn't think they would, why didn't you think that? If you don't think they should have, why don't you think they shouldn't have? Like, I hope you get my point. They are sovereign power just like we are sovereign power. And the West has taken it to themselves to almost like write international rules by themselves. They seized their ship at the behest of the United States. Iran is responding. All of these media organizations in the West are going to say Iran is up in the ante. Iran is creating provocation. All this stuff. Nonsense. All of this was started by Trump. I said in the beginning when all of this was going to take place, they were going to forget how this started. And that's exactly what's taking place. Look at the name. Look at what Guardian calls this. Iran stokes Gulf tensions by seizing 2 British-linked oil tankers. Is it Iran? Is it maybe Iran retaliates by the seizing of their tanker? Wouldn't that be more of an appropriate title? Because the thing that you want to get across to people is that ultimately it's a retaliation. It's not something that was done in and of itself as a provocation. There's a difference in those things. And there's a dramatically important difference in those things when people are reading the story and they read the title and the only thing they read is a title. Jeremy Hunt, Britain's foreign minister. UK's, foreign secretary, I'm sorry. We are absolutely clear if this situation is not resolved quickly, there will be serious consequences. But he added, we are not looking for military options. We're looking for a diplomatic way to resolve the situation, but we are clear this must be resolved. The seizures are unacceptable. It is essential that the freedom of navigation is maintained and that all ships can move safely and freely in the region, Hunt said. You know, it's funny that you're saying this now, but that freedom of navigation didn't apply to the Iranian ship that you seized. Isn't it amazing when the shoe is on the other foot? When the shoe is on the other foot, this is unacceptable. But when you seize their ship, there are reasons for it. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? The way the rule book applies to one but not the other. The Revolutionary Guard says they had seized the Steno Imperial, citing international maritime law for their actions. Iran front page quoted an unnamed military source as saying the tanker had been a crossing route other than the shipping lane in the Strait of Hormuz, had switched off its transponders and did not pay attention to Iran's warnings when it was seized by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. That may or may not be true. That may or may not be true. It is very possible that Iran is trolling the hell out of the UK for seizing their ship as a tit for tat. And tit for tat in this situation, to some degree, I don't know another option. I have no idea of another option. The seizure of the tankers came hours after authorities in Gibraltar announced that they were extending their custody of an Iranian tanker seized by Royal Marines on the 4th of July on suspicions of shipping oil to Syria in violation of the EU's embargo. Tehran has denounced the detention of the Grace 1 as a piracy carried out on the orders of Washington. It was carried out on the orders of Washington. And if I am not mistaken, the UK admits that they seized it on the orders of Washington. They admit that it's done that. You're trying to impose your laws upon Iran, and they are now doing the same to you. This is a tit for tat. And this is getting worse. Initially, it was words. Now they're seizing tankers. I mean, like, I don't mean Iran, I mean both parties. They're talking, this is becoming hardware. A drone is shot out the sky. Iran shoots it out the sky. The United States shoots something out of the sky. We don't know if it belonged to Iran or who that drone belonged to, but hardware is now getting involved into this process. This is dangerous. This is dangerous. Trump needs to get back into the JCPOA. If you want to have any level of negotiations, it starts there. It starts there. Wes, double standards at its best. Thank you, Wes. You know you always appreciate it, Wes. And Mr. Mike White. Thank you, Mr. Mike White. Leave a comment. I like when people leave comments. And Wes, thank you, man. You've been with me for a long time, and God, you have no idea how much I appreciate you. YouTube is, it's an aggravating process, that's all. It's an aggravating process. Like, it's one thing if you had standards to work by. Like if I was, like this story is going to get demonetized the moment that the story comes out because you mentioned Iran. And mentioning Iran in and of itself is enough to get the story demonetized. Also, this is not something that people care about. This is something that I care about. So it's why I do this particular story. It's not as popular. But I think the story is important. Every bit as much as important as if I was recounting this back in 1914 and 1912. Like, you get to see stepping stones where these things seem like they were inevitable processes that leads to conflict. And they're not inevitable. They're choices that people make. In this case, the United States made the explicit choice to ratchet up tensions for campaign reasons. Trump ran against the Iran deal. So in his mind, I got to get concessions on the Iran deal. Otherwise, I lose in regards to the campaign. But this is international politics. And you're killing people in regards for that campaign pledge. Now, whether Trump thinks it's a horrible deal or not is kind of besides the point to me. The U.S. entered into a deal that the rest of the world said was working. So if it wasn't working, I need something else from him that says it wasn't. I get nothing. It's campaign jargon and it's bombastic nonsense. People are dying as a result of this. And as we inch closer and closer to it, we find that it's no longer just rhetoric. It's also now hardware. And at some point, it's going to be actual human beings that's going to take a hit. And here's the catch. Donald Trump may think this is going to be a regional conflict. They thought World War I was going to be a regional conflict. Do you realize the forces that were involved in that conflict, the original forces would not have gotten involved in that conflict if they thought that other nations would have? They didn't know. Their predictions were wrong. All along the way in this process, Donald Trump has been wrong on foreign policy. There's no reason to believe that he's going to be right on this one. And by the way, he can't be right. By definition, he can't be right. Iran has no leeway to give him on this particular issue. They're a country just like us. They have their political actors just like us. They have their political conflicts just like us. And the one thing that Trump did when he took office and he pulled out of the JCPOA was make the moderates in that country that pushed for this deal look like assholes. They have no leeway. They have no leeway to give. I'll end it here. If you guys enjoy the content, thanks all. Like and share.